What's up, community? I realized I hadn't done a quick chat in a while, and so I wanted to kind of do that for a moment to jump in here. And this one, I want to talk about problems I've had with the ethics of the church. So before I jump in, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, go ahead and like the video. And then, of course, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That way, you're always alerted when we're dropping new content. And then, if you're serious about community, consider linking with us on Patreon or as a part of our YouTube membership. We also have some. We're also looking for some volunteers to help us cultivate community. So yeah, there's that. Let's jump in. Let's jump in. All right. So I definitely had problems with the ethics of the church, and so I kind of want to share some of those things with you. And they were things that were highly on my mind in 2013, 2014, as I was deconstructing and deconverting, which I feel like my whole experience with Christianity and with religion was a deconstructive process. It just took me a really, really long time. But the first problem here is just a lack of accountability across the board. Now, I am aware that I'm speaking to my context, as I often try to share in every single one of these videos. That I get it. I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm just sharing my experiences and seeing if it resonates with anyone. But for me, it was definitely seeing a lack of accountability across the board. When it comes to pastoral abuse, pastors get away with a lot. For many modern churches, um, get away with a lot because for many modern churches, the pastor's only boss is God. Yeah, there's a board, but that board is typically advisory. That's it. In many modern churches now, um, and so the pastor's only boss is God. That's the only person who can hold the pastor accountable. Um, that's a problem. I think we've seen that in a sense. There are many modern churches that operate as a theocracy. Many, and so that's problematic. We've already seen the dangers of theocracy as a society, and now we're seeing a lot of churches who are actually skirting the law by doing so, right? But that's a whole nother conversation. But and to be clear, I wanted to kind of balance that by sharing that yes, all churches are not structured that way. For example, you have Episcopal churches, which are governed by bishops, and in those churches, the pastor is absolutely held accountable in a sense. But we'll get on to some other issues there. But I will say that for Episcopal churches, for even Presbytery churches. And these are speaking to more church governance styles as opposed to denominations. So we're not just talking about Episcopalians, though they may have bishops, but we're talking about Episcopal churches, which Methodist, I believe, fall into that category. These churches are typically governed by bishops, and those bishops typically sit on a council. But then you even have some holiness churches that are Episcopal in nature, but instead of using bishops, they may use the term superintendent. But then you have Presbytery churches, and those churches are governed by elders. But even in these senses, there's a problem with the power source, because then you just move from theocracy, to monarchy, effectually, right? And then to just oligarchy, rule of the few. Um, the healthiest type of churches, as far as community wise, tend to be congregational churches, and but that's only if they're congregational and not congregational in name only. So many Baptist churches are congregational, but they're actually run by a deacon board, which is ultimately the same thing as Presbyterian's elder boards, but that's a whole nother question. But then the church that I really, the type of church governance that I've had the most experience with, the one that I've dealt with the most, have been pastoral churches, which is technically not a thing, but it's a thing. And in these churches, the pastor is seen as ultimately God's representation in the earth for their church community and those people's individuals' lives. A congregation didn't get together and hire a pastor. In these cases, a bishop did not hire a pastor, a board of directors did not hire a pastor, a board of elders. In this case, a pastor has a vision, goes out and starts a church, or splits a church. That happens sometimes too. Um, and in these churches, you do get this idea that the pastor is the representation of God. This is your man of God. This is a lot of autonomy to surrender that often results in pastoral subordinates promoting, defending, participating in, and protecting behavior that ranges from petty and vindictive to criminal and heinous, in the belief that they are protecting, rightfully so, the man or woman of God. That's their mindset there. So that creates issues with accountability when you're already going to give over your autonomy in that way, in belief that these people are the closest thing to God since Jesus, for your life, right? So then there's also the lack of a fixed standard, and that's something that I saw in almost every church, and I'm only saying almost because I don't like to exaggerate, but I'm almost sure it was all of them, but I'll be safe. Almost every church I saw this issue with the lack of a fixed standard. I was surprised at how often the standard could move, how often the standard could change, and it did, especially the more you moved from leadership, the more the standard seemed to change. And the more you moved toward the leadership, the more there seemed to be just a lot of grace. I realize in many churches, and not all in this part, but members are often held to a higher standard of behavior than the leaders. And that happens often in a very illusory type of way because the pastor is surrounded by a team of protectors who exist to keep him or her covered, you know. But yeah, it's hard to have a fixed standard. So, for example, a person who gets oh yeah, I can use this one because this happened in my city a few years ago. A person who gets pregnant and is on the praise and worship team, she can no longer be on the praise and worship team for a period, and it's typically a long period. She has to kind of redeem herself. But then at that same church, it turns out that the pastor was cheating on his wife and got somebody else pregnant, and he started another church. I mean, he didn't leave that church and started another church. No, he expanded his current church. And, you know, but again, that goes back to that issue of accountability. The pastor is able to hold other people accountable, but there are no people in the church have no empowerment to hold the pastor accountable. Now, I do want to kind of correct that statement because when I say the people of the church have no empowerment to do so, they actually do, but they operate as if they don't. And I think this is important for more than just church matters. This is important for all matters in life. You always have a choice, and you always have a voice, and it's just up to you to use it. Um, don't let anybody take that from you. Don't let any doctrine, don't let any theology, don't let anybody you love take your right to use your voice and speak up. Number one, that's the only way you learn. If I am saying something wrong here, then this will be my opportunity to find out. But I'm going to use my voice. Okay, sorry about that. Um, so moving on. Another thing that I saw that I really had a problem with was an obsession with pointlessness and pettiness. Oh my goodness. I can remember one time I was maybe 16 years old, 16, 17, and one of my compadres was with me, another musician. And one of the adults at the church was upset because I had got hired there. People barely knew me. I just came in one night and played the piano a little bit, sang a little bit, and did a little bit of charismatic ministry thing. And it was like, oh, he's our new youth worship minister of music. And there was another guy there who was um, he was an older gentleman, and I think he was trying to relive his glory days in a youth ministry. And so when I came along, and I was more age relevant to the other people, and it just seemed like a better fit. He felt like I was replacing him, and he, would often be kind of ugly towards me, and it was just like, oh, this is very weird. And one day he tried to get me into an argument, and I can't even remember the extent of the argument, but I remember in the middle of it, I just stopped him and I said, "Listen, um, this argument is fruitless, and I have no time for it." And I just walked off. And mind you, at that time, I was the 16-year-old, and he was like the 42-year-old man. And so my compadre was very impressed with my verbiage at that moment. But so yeah, but so it was just a bunch of pointless stuff. Obsession with the personal habits of others that do not impact their ability to perform their duties. Now that wasn't my scenario, but I did see that a lot, and it made me wonder. I was one of the people who held people kind of to that standard. I think some of you've heard me share some of my story before, and I was kind of judgmental. Like it was pretty bad. Like you couldn't smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol or do any of that stuff and be an attachment to my ministry. And that's funny because like, I need you to sing, I don't know why what you smoke or drink has anything to do with that unless you're just so destructive with it that it somehow damaged that ability. And then in that case, I'm not wanting you up here because you smoke or drink. It's your voice isn't great, but so I saw, and that's crazy because that's what the thing, especially for some of the more local churches, is like you kick people off the praise team for sleeping with somebody or smoking something or drinking something, but you'll keep people on the praise team who can't sing. That's just absolutely amazing to me. Like priorities much, but this whole thing is about standards, right? Um, and that's kind of a double entendre because standards is also a musical word. Um, but yeah, and so when there is such a focus on things that are actually pointless and things that are actually petty, this often blinds people to truly toxic behaviors of others. Many churches are constantly cannibalizing themselves because of this one. Because those toxic behaviors are typically steeped in such petty childishness as jealousy, offense, insecurity, and intimidation. It's quite bad. Gossip is rampant, in these churches, but it's not even just gossip, because number one, especially in the charismatic churches, the pastor thrives off of gossip. That's how he can make his messages so relevant, seem like they're touching everybody. Like, oh, I felt like he was preaching directly to me, baby, because he was, okay? The gossip network in the churches is stronger than a mug. You like, y'all, man, let me start dropping secrets out here. Okay. Okay. So anyway, and the last one, because I did want to keep this short. This is a quick chat. The last one, oh no, it's not a last one. We got two more. Okay. Lack of thorough concern and consideration. That's number one. I define professionalism as thorough consideration. That your thoracity of concern. And I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. Or maybe thoracity is how I want to do that. Your thoracity of concern. That feels right. Your thoracity of concern. Just it just makes you pay attention to what's going on, to what needs to be done. You can consider the moving variables because you're thoroughly concerned with what's going on. And what I find in churches that makes ethics problematic is people are first and foremost not thoroughly concerned enough with their beliefs, right? You're not even thoroughly concerned enough with your beliefs to determine why you believe these and to actually establish this on something foundational. Otherwise that debate would be done. It'd be like, oh no, this is true, but it's not. Not enough, not concerned enough about sin to research it. Like I realized that a lot of people who had opinions about sin had never done any studies on those things, like not academic studies. They just had all of these opinions about sin, and I remember at one point I realized that, oh snap, I have been raised and really motivated to believe that black people can't handle their alcohol. Like I realized that was like a major message that came through the black church, came through the black community, and it's because of this attachment to the idea of sin for them. But it even came through in a lot of our shows, a lot of the shows that we watch. watched. I started noticing that, wait a minute, on some of the shows of other cultures, I see people, sophisticated, drinking and talking about doing things in life and enjoying their families. Oh, go get dad a beer, and things like that. But in my shows, like in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters, hanging with Mr. Cooper, even living single, alcohol was treated very, derogatory. It was like, oh no, anybody who drinks alcohol. And I was like, ooh, that's yikes. But anyway, so just not concerned enough to actually affiliate themselves with a depth of understanding for anything that they're labeling as sin. Beyond it, you know how many people who have this idea that homosexuality or anything like that is not natural, who've never done any research on biology at all. They just have these opinions. Isn't that amazing? Um, and then not concerned enough with helping. And I want to clarify here that I'm not saying that I didn't see churches trying to help. I'm saying there was not a ferocity of concern or not enough ferocity of concern for them to actually determine if what they were doing was actually helping. And then, not concerned enough to investigate anything, because why investigate? God knows. And if somebody did anything wrong, God will handle it. Right? This stuff is horrendous for ethics. And this is the last one: inattention to results. That was a biggie for me. Even some of the most well organized and well meaning churches that I've come across, it never fails to find failure to pay attention to results. Never fails. Which tracks, because this is something that happens if you accept an entire belief system without requirement for evidence. Which, let's be honest, that's the case. All right, so, and here's what I mean. For example, within the church, there are high divorce rates. This theology does not build healthy marriages. Within the church, there are a high rate of dysfunctional families. This theology does not build healthy families. And there is a high rate of abuse in the church. This theology does not build healthy community. Now, for some of you who say, "Well, my marriage is healthy and my family is very functional," and you can back that up with evidence, and my church community is, well, I don't think anybody can say that part, but we'll give you the first two. If you can say those things, I would say immediately that is likely in spite of your religious beliefs, not because. All right, that was my quick chat. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, engage, join Patreon membership, check out the merchandise, consider volunteering, all that good stuff. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. I love you. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful.